The smoke from the grill curled through the summer air as laughter spilled across the backyard. I remember the sunlight glinting off plastic cups, the scent of barbecue sauce, the sound of everyone praising my daughter for her perfect life, a life I quietly funded. Then she looked at me, eyes sharp, smile sweet, and said something that made the crowd laugh. In that instant, my chest burned hotter than the July heat. If you've ever been humiliated by someone you love, subscribe and tell me where you're listening from, because silence can hurt louder than any scream. I stood there, smiling, pretending it didn't matter, while something inside me finally cracked. That was the moment everything started to unravel. It was late afternoon, the kind of golden summer light that makes everything look softer than it really is. The backyard smelled like grilled corn and charcoal, and laughter spilled from the patio as neighbors and family gathered around long folding tables. I remember standing by the drinks cooler, smiling the way you do when you're part of the noise but not really in it. Then she said it, my daughter, Rebecca, loud enough for everyone to hear. The words cut through the chatter, casual and cruel. Something about how I couldn't even handle the simplest things. People laughed. Maybe they thought it was harmless teasing, but I felt my face flush, heat creeping up my neck as I forced a smile that didn't belong to me. I had spent years giving, fixing, paying, helping, yet in that moment, I was the punchline. I looked at her, so confident, so sure she was untouchable, and something inside me broke, quietly. I didn't argue, I didn't cry, I just stood there, nodding, as if I deserved it. But deep down, a single thought formed, sharp and clear. This ends now. Later that night, when the laughter faded and the house was silent, I realized this wasn't just about disrespect. It was about how far I had let love excuse everything. That was the moment I stopped being the helpful mother. This isn't a story about money or favors. It's about what happens when love goes too far, and how I finally found the strength to stop. I live in Evanston, Illinois, a quiet suburb where the trees arch over the streets like they're guarding something fragile. I've been here most of my adult life. I raised my daughter, Rebecca, in a small 2-bedroom house not far from the lake. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. I worked as a school administrator for 28 years. My paycheck was steady, not huge, but enough. And I made sure she never went without anything she needed. When her father left, she was only 8. I told myself I could be both parents. I packed lunches, paid for dance lessons, stayed up late proofreading her essays. Everything I did came from love. Maybe that's where it began, the pattern of me filling in every gap, even when she was old enough to fill them herself. At first, helping her felt natural. When she got married, I paid for part of the wedding. When her first car broke down, I helped with repairs. When she and her husband couldn't afford their first apartment in Chicago, I sent $800 for rent. It didn't feel like much, just a mother doing what mothers do. But the numbers kept growing. Later, when the marriage ended, I started sending $2,200 every month. Just until you get on your feet, I told her. That line became my routine excuse, even when it stopped being true. Each transfer came with a justification. She was struggling. I had savings. I wanted her to have a chance I never had. I told myself it was love. But over time, love began to feel like debt. Something I owed her simply because she was mine. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, staring at my bank statement one evening, realizing I'd spent more helping her that year than on my own mortgage. Still, I couldn't stop. Every time she asked, I told myself, next month, I'll say no. But the word never came. I was proud to be dependable, the kind of mother who never failed her child. I didn't see that my reliability had become her expectation and my prison. Looking back now, I see the warning signs, the subtle entitlement in her tone, the way thank you slowly disappeared from our conversations. I ignored all of it because facing the truth meant admitting I was part of the problem. I used to think love meant saying yes, even when it hurt. But nothing prepared me for how quickly that love could turn into humiliation. It was a warm Sunday afternoon in Naperville. The air smelled like grilled ribs and sweet corn, and laughter floated across the backyard of Mark's uncle's house. People leaned on picnic tables, balancing paper plates and half-empty drinks, talking over one another in that loud, familiar way families do. I remember standing near the patio door, holding a bowl of fruit I'd brought, smiling when someone glanced my way, pretending I belonged in the noise. Rebecca was in her element, moving from group to group, her voice bright and full of confidence. She looked beautiful, radiant even. I felt proud watching her. When one of Mark's cousins asked how she managed to afford her townhouse, she gave a little shrug and said something about hard work and independence. Everyone clapped. I stayed quiet. I wanted to be invisible. Because I knew the truth, the mortgage, the repairs, even the last property tax bill. It all came from me. The conversations blurred after that. I heard bits of praise, how responsible she was, how inspiring for her age. Each word landed like a small weight in my chest. I told myself not to ruin it for her. Let her have this moment. That's what mothers do. They swallow their truth to protect their children's pride. Then it happened. It was small, almost careless, but it changed everything. Someone mentioned how lucky she was to have such a supportive mom. She laughed and said she couldn't imagine depending on anyone like that. How she'd go crazy if she ever had to be taken care of. The words sliced through me, quiet but sharp. A few people laughed. I felt the sound ripple around me like heat. My hands went cold. I looked down at my plate and saw the fruit trembling against the fork. I told myself to breathe, to stay calm, to not make a scene. But inside, I could feel something collapse. It wasn't just embarrassment, it was grief. Years of sacrifice, erased in one sentence. I wanted to disappear, to vanish into the chatter and clinking glasses. Yet somehow, I managed to smile. I nodded along like it didn't matter. The rest of the evening was a blur. I heard more laughter, more stories, more pride, but I couldn't feel anything. My chest was tight, my stomach hollow. When it was finally time to leave, I said my goodbyes and walked to my car in silence. The ride home felt endless. The road lights flashed across the windshield like a slow metronome counting down the seconds to a new reality. In that quiet, I replayed every moment, every check I'd written, every bill I'd covered, every late-night reassurance that she'd get back on her feet. It all came back, but now it felt different. I realized I wasn't helping her anymore. I was enabling her to erase me. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the decision had already been made. No confrontation, no speech, just clarity. I smiled through the pain, but inside, I had already decided something. The rent payment stops here. The next morning was unusually quiet. No birdsong, no hum of traffic, just a soft stillness that filled the house. I sat at the kitchen table, the same place where I'd written so many checks, planned so many ways to help. The smell of coffee drifted through the air. It felt heavy, almost sacred. My hands wrapped around the mug for warmth. But what I really needed was courage. I opened my laptop and stared at the banking app. Her rent transfer was due that morning. $2,200, same as always. My finger hovered over the screen for a long moment. It was such a small motion, a single tap, but it carried years of history. The laughter from that barbecue replayed in my head. The way her voice cut through me. The way I'd smiled to hide the hurt. I realized I'd spent so long giving that I'd forgotten what it meant to keep something for myself. My dignity, my peace, my worth. I took a slow breath and canceled the payment. Just like that, the chain broke. There was no music, no grand feeling of victory. Just a deep exhale, like finally setting down a weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying for decades. Then came the guilt. It crept in quietly, whispering that I was cruel, ungrateful, unloving. I tried to imagine her reaction, anger, confusion, maybe silence. But beneath the guilt, something else stirred relief. For the first time, I wasn't acting out of fear or obligation. I was choosing myself. I thought about all the times I told her yes because I couldn't stand to see her struggle. But maybe that was never kindness. Maybe it was avoidance, of conflict, of loss, of my own loneliness. Real love, I realized, sometimes looks like letting go. It's saying, I believe you can stand on your own, even if they don't believe it yet. I sat there for a while longer, just breathing. The light through the kitchen window shifted, touching the floor like a quiet promise. I didn't shout. I didn't explain. I simply stopped. The silence came first. No texts, no calls, no little messages asking for help or updates about bills. The first few days felt strange, like walking through a familiar house after all the furniture had been taken out. Every sound echoed. I kept glancing at my phone, expecting something, but nothing came. The quiet wasn't cruel, it was heavy, still, waiting. I filled my mornings with routine. Coffee brewing at 7:15 a.m., the sound of the paper hitting the front porch, folding laundry that had sat untouched. At first, it all felt mechanical, like I was rehearsing a new version of life I hadn't yet chosen. Sometimes guilt would sneak in, whispering that I'd abandoned her, that a real mother never stops giving. But then another voice, soft, steady, would remind me that love isn't measured by how much you lose of yourself. I started journaling again, something I hadn't done since my 20s. Some pages were just lists, things I liked, things I'd forgotten I liked. Other times, I wrote small confessions how exhausted I'd been pretending to be fine, how much I wanted peace. Writing it down made the truth real and less frightening. A week later, I went for a walk along the lakefront. The air was cool, the sky wide and pale. I watched children play, couples stroll, life move without me needing to fix it. That realization hit harder than I expected. I didn't have to rescue anyone anymore. For years, my love had been a job. Now it was becoming something quieter, closer to peace, I started tending my garden again. The hydrangeas had nearly withered, but I trimmed and watered them each morning. Watching them come back to life felt symbolic, like something inside me was doing the same. I began budgeting for myself, cooking meals just for one, even calling an old friend for coffee. Small things, but they mattered. Freedom didn't arrive with fireworks. It came in tiny, steady breaths, in the slow return of my own voice. The silence that once felt lonely began to sound like music, soft, steady, mine. For the first time in years, I was living for me. The peace didn't end loudly. It began with a letter, an official-looking envelope that arrived one Thursday morning. I almost ignored it, assuming it was junk mail. But when I saw my name printed above a balance I didn't recognize, my stomach tightened. It was from a credit company I'd never used, saying I owed $8,700. I laughed at first, certain it was a mistake. I hadn't opened a new account in years. I called the number. The representative read off my address, my social security number, even the name of the small business attached to the account. A business I'd never heard of. My voice shook as I explained there had to be an error. The woman hesitated before saying that several other accounts under my name were also in default. I hung up. The room felt smaller. My heart started racing, not from fear of debt, but from a deeper knowing I didn't want to face. I sat there for a long time, staring at the letter. My mind kept circling back to Rebecca. She'd handled some paperwork for me before, helped renew my car insurance, once even offered to simplify my online banking. At the time, I thought it was sweet. She was just being helpful. But that memory started to sour the longer I thought about it. I logged into my account. What I saw made my hands go numb. There were transfers I didn't authorize, credit applications I'd never filled out, and names of vendors I didn't recognize. My daughter had been using my information for years. The days that followed felt like falling through a trapdoor. Each call I made to verify accounts revealed another lie. A credit card in Texas. A business license under my address. Fake emails I'd never written. I wasn't angry at first. I was stunned. The betrayal didn't come with shouting or tears. It came with a quiet disbelief that settled deep in my bones. Every memory rewrote itself. Every thank you she'd ever said now sounded hollow. Every moment of pride curdled into regret. I had spent decades trying to give her a life better than mine, and she'd used that trust to build a world of deceit. I sat in bed one night, the glow of my laptop screen lighting the room. The evidence was there. Documents, timestamps, bank records. I remember thinking how strange it was that the truth could be both invisible and undeniable. I didn't know whether to call the police or call her. My heart said, protect her. My conscience said, stop her. For a while, I told myself maybe she just made a mistake. Maybe she didn't mean to. But deep down, I knew. You don't accidentally forge your mother's name 20 times. The next morning, I made a folder. Every email, every statement, every transaction. I didn't know what to do with it yet, but I knew I couldn't hide it anymore. Denial had protected her long enough. I thought I'd lost her to greed. I didn't know I'd lose her to the law. The call came on a gray Tuesday morning. I was folding towels when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. A calm voice on the other end introduced himself from the Financial Crimes Division. He said my name, confirmed my address, and then paused before explaining that I was listed as a primary identity victim in an active fraud investigation. My knees went weak. I sat down slowly, towel still in my hands. He asked if I knew a woman named Rebecca Hughes. My heart clenched. I didn't need to answer. The silence on my end told him everything. He said there were multiple cases, credit fraud, fake business accounts, stolen identities. Some documents had my signature, some didn't. I felt my throat tighten. My daughter's name echoed in my head like a verdict. Later that week, 2 agents visited the house. They were polite, professional, and devastatingly thorough. They laid out files and photographs on my dining table, the same table where I'd celebrated her birthdays, her graduations, her wedding. Each page was another small death. I saw my name attached to fake companies registered in 3 states. I saw checks she'd written using my account. I saw faces of strangers she'd taken money from, pretending to be someone she wasn't. The more they explained, the smaller the room felt. I remember gripping the edge of the table, trying to stay upright while they talked. My mind kept flashing between the facts and the memories. Her first apartment, the car I helped her buy, the trust I never questioned. The 2 versions of her collided in my head until I couldn't tell which one was real anymore. When they asked if I'd be willing to cooperate, I nodded. My body moved before my mind caught up. I wanted to protect her, but I also knew the truth was too big to hide. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the streetlights blur through tears, wondering how love could turn into this. Weeks passed. Investigators found more: fake tax filings, stolen identities from neighbors, even forged loans. The scale of it was overwhelming. I wasn't the only victim. She had built a web of deceit so wide that it had reached federal jurisdiction. When they mentioned potential charges, wire fraud, identity theft, federal investigation, I stopped breathing for a moment. My daughter wasn't just lost. She was gone, pulled into a darkness I'd unknowingly funded. The guilt came in waves. I thought about all the times I'd said yes, all the times I'd refused to see the signs. I had confused enabling with love. I thought I was protecting her from the world, but I'd been protecting her from consequences. And that's what allowed the lies to grow. The day I signed the final statement for investigators, my hand trembled. But when I put down the pen, I felt something shift. It wasn't peace. Not yet. But it was truth. And truth, no matter how painful, is the only ground solid enough to rebuild on. The daughter I raised was gone. But maybe, just maybe, the woman I used to be was finally coming back. It's been nearly a year now. The noise has faded. The investigations have slowed, and life has grown quiet again. But this time, the quiet feels peaceful. I wake up early, make coffee, and watch the sunrise through my kitchen window. The same house, the same light, but everything inside me has changed. There are still moments when I think about her, where she might be, whether she's safe, whether she understands what she's done, but I don't let those thoughts drown me anymore. Love doesn't disappear, but it evolves. I learned that love without truth isn't love. It's fear dressed as kindness, and I've spent too many years confusing one for the other. I started giving life back to simple things. My garden, once overgrown, now blooms again. I've begun donating things I no longer need, not out of bitterness, but because it feels good to release what no longer serves me. Healing, I've found, isn't loud or dramatic. It's quiet. It's waking up one day and realizing the past doesn't sting the same way it used to. Forgiveness came slowly. It wasn't approval or forgetting. It was release. I forgave her for me, not for her. Carrying anger was just another kind of prison, and I finally learned how to open the door. If there's one truth this journey gave me, it's that love has to include boundaries. Saying no doesn't mean closing your heart. It means protecting it. You can love someone deeply and still choose yourself. That's not cruelty. That's wisdom. So now, when I look at my life, I see more than loss. I see freedom. I see a woman who stopped breaking herself to keep others whole. Have you ever had to let someone go to save yourself? Looking back now, it's hard to believe how much has changed. What started as heartbreak became something else entirely. Clarity, strength, and peace I never thought I'd feel again. The pain didn't vanish overnight, but it became the soil where I learned to grow something new: respect for myself. If you've ever given too much, if you've ever lost yourself trying to hold someone else together, maybe you understand this kind of silence, the one that hurts at first but eventually starts to heal you. Love can be beautiful, but without boundaries, it can also be destructive. I had to learn that the hard way. This story isn't just about loss. It's about learning that saying enough can be the most loving thing we ever do, for others and for ourselves. So I want to ask you, have you ever faced that moment when you realized letting go was the only way forward? How did it change you? I read every comment, and I'd love to hear your story. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without breaking.